Hi guys, MissChief here and welcome to my very first video. I absolutely adore all true crime, so here we are today. And I hope that you enjoy the video. It would mean a lot to me if you liked and subscribed, but that's okay if you don't. Now, on to today's case. Could you imagine going out for a bike ride with your best friend, like you have done so many times before, but this time something grotesque happens to the both of you? The Towpath Murders is today's topic. While the country was in a euphoric time with the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II upcoming, something terrible was about to happen. It was Sunday, 31st of May, 1953. Two best friends, Barbara Songhurst, 16, and Christine Reed, 18, were out enjoying a bike ride together along the towpath in Teddington, London, as they have done so many times before. They met up with some friends who were camping along the route that they cycled at 8 p.m. that night. One of the boys had stated that they both left at 11 p.m. to ride back home. They were seen on the towpath at 11:30 p.m., but they had never arrived home. The next day, Barbara's body was found near St. Catherine's Convent, 2 miles away from the murder site. The brutality found on her young body was nothing short of savage. It was found that Barbara had a fractured skull caused by a heavy blow to the cheek, 3 stab wounds in her back, and to top it all off, she was raped. What sort of a monster could do this to such a young soul? Her best friend was yet to be found. Did she manage to get away? Or had Christine succumbed to the same fate? The investigation had begun the next day, where police had asked the river authorities to drain the river from Richmond to Teddington's Half Lock. At this time of year, it was very uncommon for the river to be drained, but police needed to find the murder weapon, which they believed had been thrown into the river. They painstakingly dredged through layers of mud and silt, hoping to find what could have done this to the young victim. All that was found was a pair of shoes and socks. But where was Christine Reed? Christine's bicycle was found in a heap of mud 100 yards away from the murder site on the 2nd of June. While the celebration of the Queen's coronation was underway on the 5th of June, the police were not celebrating anything. They were looking for the missing girl's body. June 6th comes around and finally they had found Christine, floating near Glover's Island, close to Eel Pie Island. She had similar injuries to Barbara. Her skull had been fractured. She had 6 stab wounds to her chest, and she had also been raped. What sort of a so-called man could have done this to two girls that had the rest of their lives ahead of them? Police had still found no murder weapon. While dredging the river, and Barbara's bicycle was nowhere to be found, which led them to believe that the killer, or killers, had fled on it. In the area at the time was a reporter by the name of Duncan Webb from News of the World. He was questioned by the police. Duncan had suggested that it was just one perpetrator who had committed this vile act on the two teenagers. Based off of the MO, as both girls had similar injuries, which was less likely to be two men with the same MO. But there was one question on the minds of the investigating officers. How did one man manage to murder both the girls? This had to be the work of someone who knew the area or who lived in the area, right? The police wanted to focus on facts, which led them to conduct 1,650 statements from men around the area of the murders and of that where the bodies were found. None of which worked out, and it was now becoming clearer that this double brutality may never be solved. The police weren't about to give up. While looking further afield, they took another look at a case that had taken place just 1 week before the murders. In Oxshott Heath, Surrey, a 14-year-old girl had been viciously raped. Reports of a man terrorizing women and girls on the Surrey side of the river came to light. June 17th, a woman called Mrs. Birch was sexually assaulted in Richmond Park, just 2 weeks after the despicable murders. 11 miles away from the scene of the assault, a man was picked up by a police patrol car. Found to be wandering around aimlessly, this man was Alfred Charles Whiteway, 22 years old. They eventually let him go with an apology after he had proved himself to be coherent. And from what I know about the case, that was a mistake. After this, on June 18th, Officer P.C. Kosh was cleaning police cars and had found a hatchet in one of them. He thought nothing of it and placed it into his locker before he finished his shift. He became ill after this. He was off work for a full 5 days. Once returning to work, P.C. Kosh took the hatchet home and used it to chop wood. Yes, you heard me. Took it home and used it to chop wood. Now, I know back in 1953, evidence wasn't as it is today, as we all know. But seriously, taking this weapon home and using it to chop wood instead of handing it in was superbly ridiculous. Because of his actions, it took longer to capture a deranged and dangerous murderer. Nearly a month later, after the brutal and vile murders of Barbara and Christine on June 28th, a motorist picked up a male hitchhiker. This driver was very observant and noticed something a little off about the male hitchhiker. Something about him reminded the driver of the mystery man who had viciously raped the 14-year-old girl. The driver went to the police with this information, and the hitchhiker was later picked up by the police and charged with the rape. The mystery man was then put into an identity lineup where Mrs. Birch picked him out for the assault on her. This man was identified as none other than Alfred Charles Whiteway. Like I said, big mistake letting him go. During the investigation on Whiteway, it had been uncovered that he had close ties with Barbara's family. Her sister June had once been in a relationship with Whiteway, and furthermore, June's sister Josephine had gone to school with Whiteway and once had hope of marrying him. Barbara's brother also knew the suspect very well and tried to defend his character to the police. Both Barbara's brother and June were adamant that Whiteway could not have done this, even though he had always carried a knife on his person. Detective Hanman, the lead officer, noticed that his knife was a deadly Gurkha knife, which I'll show you here. He had discovered that Whiteway was a keen knife-throwing enthusiast and had substantially exceptional skills in this area. Meaning, he could split a matchbox from 30 yards away. Let that sink in. The most important fact came to light. Whiteway was able to hit a chalk line on a tree from 40 yards away with a hatchet. Now, we know that a hatchet was left in the police car. We also know that Alfred Whiteway was picked up in a police car. And we also know that PC Kosh decided to take a hatchet home to chop wood, which is just mind-blowing to me. It really is. The police raced over to PC Kosh in Kensington Station and realised that the evidence on the hatchet had unknowingly been destroyed due to Kosh using it for weeks to chop wood. Doesn't take a genius. It doesn't. But again, it's 1953. What can you do? You know? The mystery of what weapon could potentially cause as much damage as what had happened to Barbara and Christine had now seemingly been solved. Detective Hannum used the hatchet to his advantage. Regardless of any evidence that had now been destroyed, he placed the hatchet in front of Whiteway, who recognised it straight away, complaining about how bashed about it had been and how blunt it had become. Luckily, police had found traces of blood on Whiteway's shoe when they brought him in, around the eyelet and the seams. Whiteway is now faced with the fact that police had now caught him. And not just for the rape on the 14-year-old girl, and not just for the sexual assault on Mrs. Birch. But, with this in mind, he blurted out, "You know bloody well it was me. You know bloody well I done it. What a bloody mess. I'm mental. I must have a fucking woman. I can't stop myself." Like, Yeah. Okay then, White Way. Just think that you're mental for it. Sure, 'cause that's gonna get you off, isn't it? Like so many criminals try today, they try to plead the insanity just so they get non-prison time. But did it work for him? In a chilling and uncaring way, he divulged what happened on the night of 31st of May, when he violently raped and murdered Barbara and Christine. Now, I have looked up what he said he did, okay? And I am not about to put it in this because this was absolutely disgraceful, what he said he had done. All I can say to that is that being the knife throwing enthusiast and knowing how to throw a hatchet, he managed to take down one of the girls, which is why Christine had the stab wounds in her chest. When he realized there was another girl there who was starting to run away, girl being Barbara, he threw the hatchet into her back. Let it sink in just how dangerous and sadistic this man is. No, he's not really a man, is he? He's a monster. To be able to do all these four things, and who knows what else this man has done and not been caught for. After the trial, at the Old Bailey, it took the jury under 50 minutes to come to the conclusion that he was guilty and was eventually hanged by the legendary hangman himself, Albert Pierre Point, at Wandsworth Prison on December 22nd, 1953. Thank God. Someone like that was taken off of the streets pretty quickly, to be fair. I mean, sometimes murderers go for months, even years, without getting caught. This man, however, was pretty quick. So, the nightmare had come to an end. Albert Whiteway could never, ever hurt another woman or young girl again. Now, I am going to finish this off by looking and thinking about the two girls that were murdered by his cruel, cruel hands. And that is Barbara Songhurst, only 16 years old, and her best friend, Christine Reed, only 18 years old. All they wanted to do was ride their bike together down the towpath like they had done so many times before. They were said to be very popular, very outgoing, and loved by their friends and their families. And I know this was a very long time ago now, 1953. But I do hope that both of their families could at least rest somewhat knowing that their murderer had been hung. It's not going to hurt any less, you know? But it's a consolation that he was caught, he was charged, he was found guilty, and then he was put to death. It's a shame that these things have to happen. It really is a shame. So, that was the Towpath Murders that happened in 1953. If you have any comments, you know where to leave them. It would be awesome if you could like and subscribe if you like what you see so far, being my very first video. If you would like me to do a certain murder, please let me know in the comments below, and I will check it all out. So thank you for listening. Well, watching and listening. And I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.